call this meeting of the regular Planning Commission of August 28th, 2017 to order. I'll ask at this time for approval of minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of July 24th of 2017. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion?
I just wanted to ask about the action that we took about having an agenda approval, and that's mentioned in the minutes. Is that possible to have in future agendas?
Yes. So the Planning Commission did adopt that as part of the revised bylaws, which you passed at the last meeting, and I will provide you with a copy of those to sign, or for the chair and the secretary to sign today. On the technology side of getting it into our agenda software, that might take a little longer, but the Planning Commission did formally adopt that, so it is now in effect.
I think we can just add it in too. So.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, then, I'll ask for approval of this agenda of August 28th, 2017. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so then this is the time for an opportunity for citizens to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. So is there anybody here who wants to come talk about anything that is not on the agenda? This is your time. Anybody? Okay. We will move on then. Our first public hearing then is to continue a public hearing to consider plans for a new quick serve restaurant with drive-through and site improvements at 6529 Penn Avenue, 6545 Penn Avenue, and 2210 66th Street East to September 25th, 2017. Staff, this is the second time we've moved this. Do you want to talk a little bit about why?
Yes, thank you, Chair Vrees-Daniels, members of the Planning Commission. In June 2017, Penn Avenue Partners submitted preliminary plans for a Dunkin Donuts restaurant with a drive-through at 6529 Penn Avenue, currently home to the Car Hop, and proposed site improvements to the adjacent parcels at 6545 Penn Avenue, which was formerly the Flowerama business, and 2210 66th Street West. That's a typo in the staff report. It should say West, which is an unimproved alley adjacent to those properties. The public hearing and Planning Commission consideration of these items was initially scheduled for the July 24th meeting. Prior to that meeting, the applicant requested that the hearing be postponed until this meeting while they continued to work on plan revisions based on staff feedback. While the revised plans were received in time to be considered at this meeting, a number of staff's concerns remained unaddressed in those plans, including the sidewalk width and placement along Penn Avenue, any right-of-way or easement dedication related to that, drive-through stacking conflicts with where they've shown the handicap-accessible parking spaces, and more. Staff was not comfortable recommending approval without knowing whether or not those items could be adequately addressed. So staff is recommending that the public hearing be continued to the September 25th, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Continuing this public hearing to September 25th would allow for the City Council to make a decision at the scheduled City Council meeting on October 10th, which that does fall within the timeline set forth in state statutes requiring a city to make a decision within 60 days of receiving a completed application. So that's all I have for you as far as a staff report. So staff is just recommending that this be continued one more month.
Okay. And we feel like the issues can be worked out, plan can be changed by then?
Yes, their application and plans were substantially complete. It's just some of these remaining issues I think were too big to to move forward on. We do often bring plans before you that are not 100% complete. We often require items such as a landscaping plan or things like that are conditioned upon approval, and that often works out well. In this case, the sidewalk issue we felt could impact some of the other things. As you may recall from the study session, one of the main things they are asking for is a variance from the drive-through setback regulation. So that's the distance from the drive-through speaker to the nearest residential property. typically that requirement is 150 feet. In this case, on the site plan, it looks like it's closer to 90 feet, somewhere in that range. With the sidewalk issue not resolved, there's the potential that the building would scoot over, would have to be shifted by a few feet, which then in turn could change the distance of the variance that they're asking for. We can't bring an item to you and to the city council. We can't bring a variance request forward without knowing exactly what that number was.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for staff? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move that we continue to the next meeting.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Yes.
Could I just ask, other than if it were to be approved today, which I don't think there's any appetite to do, what exactly would be approved? Like what would need to be asked for roughly based on what you showed us in this packet? Is it just the variance and the site plan approval, the variance for the drive-through speaker?
It's a conditional use permit for the restaurant use, and the variance for the drive-through setback. There may have also been a building setback variance, but certainly those two, the conditional use permit for restaurant and the drive-through speaker setback variance.
Okay. And we're to assume that the drive-through speaker setback variance will be part of any site plan brought to us, right?
That's correct. Yeah, on a site of this size, it's simply not possible for them to meet that 150-foot setback requirement. I don't believe the parcel itself is even 150 feet wide, so
okay.
We are looking at a variance somewhere in the ballpark of 85 to 90 feet to the nearest residential property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so there's been a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of continuing the public hearing to September 25th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll move on to item number 2, which is to continue a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendments related to driveway regulations to September 25th, 2017. Staff, any key details on this?
My apologies, technical difficulties. At the direction of the City Council, staff have begun researching potential options to modify driveway regulations. Current regulations prohibit a property with a single-car garage from having a driveway that is wider than the garage itself. City staff and council members annually receive a small number of complaints regarding this policy. In conjunction with relaxing that particular regulation, staff is also researching other potential modifications to driveway regulations, which were last modified or updated back in 2005. There was a memo sent out to the City Council earlier this month on the matter that was attached to the report. And in anticipation of bringing forward an ordinance amendment this month, notice of this public hearing was published in the Sun Current newspaper. Notice was published, and at this time, research and refinement of that ordinance amendment is still underway. That work should be complete prior to the September 25th Planning Commission meeting. So we just need to continue the public hearing to the next meeting since that notice was published.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would move that we continue to next month.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All right, there's a motion to move this item to September 25th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3. Let me make this larger so I can read it. This is a public hearing to consider a resolution reapproving site plans for a community bandshell at Veterans Memorial Park. Staff.
Thank you. In June and July of 2016, the Planning Commission and City Council approved site plans for a community bandshell at Veterans Memorial Park. Since that time, a sound study has been conducted in accordance with the resolution that was approved by the Planning Commission and City Council, and the project has since been put out to bid a number of times. Previous bids were rejected because the bids exceeded the amount of funding secured. Then on July 25th, 2017, the council awarded a contract to Fendler Patterson Construction Group Foundation work for the Bandshell is expected to take place this year with completion of the structure in the spring. Awarding that contract has taken longer than was initially expected, and the site plan must now be reapproved. No changes have been made to the plans that were previously reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval last year. And basically the reason for that is that unless building permits have been issued and work is underway, all land use approvals expire in 1 year. So basically, it just barely exceeded the 1 year mark since the Planning Commission and City Council approved this last year.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for staff before we open up the public hearing? All right. So this is a public hearing. If anybody would like to come up and speak about the Bandshell, you can have 5 minutes to come speak. That is our guidelines. And just come up and state your name and address and sign up. Anybody want to talk about the Bandshell? No one? No one wants to talk about the Bandshell? All right. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is closed. All right. Should we start with the motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I think we've discussed this quite a bit, so I'm glad we're reapproving. Would like to see this complete. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, I believe we are on. This is consideration of a variety of land use approvals related to a proposal for construction of 3 new multifamily apartment buildings and rehabilitation of 3 existing apartment buildings between 66th and 68th Street along 18th Avenue, Richfield Parkway, and Cedar Avenue. Staff.
Thank you, Chair Rees Daniels. Inland Development Partners, who is formerly known as Anderson Companies, first approached the city with preliminary plans for the development of approximately 300 units of apartments in the Cedar corridor on September 22nd, 2015. This proposal and the potential impact of the tunnel under Highway 77 prompted the city to revisit the 2004 Cedar Corridor Master Plan. Since that time, the comprehensive plan update and project have moved forward somewhat concurrently. The proposed final development plan includes 3 new buildings, totaling 284 new units, and renovation and rehabilitation of the 3 existing buildings, which are 11 units apiece, for a total of 33 units. As part of the master plan update, the alignment of Richfield Parkway moved from Cedar Avenue to 18th Avenue. This, combined with the city's increased focus on the preservation of existing affordable housing, has shaped the placement and design of the proposed buildings. While removal of the existing 3 buildings would allow the project to shift to the east and eliminate the need for a comprehensive plan amendment, both staff and the developer feel that renovation would be a better choice that will preserve existing affordable units and avoid displacing current residents. The 3 buildings will be fully incorporated into the development, and tenants will have access to all of the amenities of the new buildings. By way of history, the city began work to redevelop this area in 2002 in reaction to the runway expansion at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. That really resulted from a study that was done jointly by the Metropolitan Airports Commission, the FAA, and the City of Richfield that found that the impacts of low-frequency noise could not be tolerated by the existing single-family homes, and that was really the impetus for this redevelopment. While some redevelopment activities in the area did begin in 2002 to 2005, the recession stalled the work and stalled the progress of redevelopment. The proposed project would be the first new multifamily apartment project constructed on the city's east side since 1971. The project addresses the noise vibration issues that originally prompted the redevelopment by providing a buffer to the older single-family homes to the west, but it also addresses a number of current goals and policies of the Cedar Corridor Master Plan, including the establishment of a renewed brand at a signature gateway to the city, the increase in the diversity of housing options, and the encouragement of rehabilitation and replacement of the lowest quality housing stock. The proposed project attempts to mimic the general architecture of the nearby housing and exceeds minimum setback requirements in order to minimize shadows on adjacent single-family properties. With that, I would just halt for a second and note that a shadow study was done, and that's been provided to you. And we can talk about that in greater depth if you'd like, but really the results showed that there were no significant shadow impacts at any time during the year. The development is attractively designed with significant landscaping and minimal views of surface parking lots. Landscaping throughout the project is extensive and includes the 3 existing buildings along Cedar. These properties will receive the foundation planting and parking lot screening that are required for any new development. The project provides nearly double the required outdoor space for a project of this size, and the impervious surface is well below allowable limits. All apartment residents will have access to a number of amenities that are designed and expected in new construction, but found in few properties in Richfield. Among these is a dog area, pool, an outdoor terrace, community gardens, playground, exercise and group fitness rooms, and a common space club room. The development has been designed using crime prevention through environmental design or CPTED strategies, and the developer has met with the city's crime prevention specialists to ensure that they are taking steps necessary to maintain a safe environment. On-street parking along Richfield Parkway will help to slow traffic on this important bicycle and pedestrian route. The proposal also designates space for public art. Staff finds that the proposed project meets the intent of the redevelopment plans and the code requirements for this area and recommends approval of the project. Really, there are just a couple of other things I'd want to point out. One is, while there is a small strip that has to be changed in the comprehensive plan for this to go forward, that was a recent change. And maybe, Matt, if we can pull up the prior comprehensive plan.
And if the tech could bring up, there we go. Thank you.
So there is an area between 67th and 68th that you'll see on the left, shown as brown. Where that's labeled current, really how that should be labeled, it was current at the time it was put together, but it was the 2004 to 2016 plan, and that is high density multifamily. Let me double check that. Yes, high density multifamily. And so from 2004 to 2016, for that 12-year period, it was designated for high density multifamily. Is since switched in the 2016 plan to multifamily with Cedar overlay that has a lower density allowance, a lower density than the proposal would require. I just wanted to make sure that was not something new that's been considered in the past. And as was discussed in the staff report, originally the hope was that the development could be shifted further to the east, but with the preservation of the existing apartment buildings, it didn't allow enough developable space for that to occur. So it's really a choice that had to be made. This project has received a great deal of public input. There have been 4 open houses related to this project, and I believe this has gone to either 2 or 3 joint work sessions of the Planning Commission, City Council, and HRA. So I think with that, I would just stand for any questions you might have.
Can you speak to the differences between why we are going from medium density residential to mixed use when it appears to just be residential? Or am I reading that wrong?
No, and the way we term, and Matt, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we're terming mixed use is really a departure from the way it was thought of in the past. In the past, when we talked about mixed use, it was a mix on a particular parcel. Really, we're talking about an area-wide mix of uses. And so one parcel, even a large one, could be all of one use, but that shouldn't disallow adjacent parcels to be a different use, and that's really what this allows.
Anybody have any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Leary.
Yeah, so I've got a couple questions for either for planning staff or possibly for Public Works, since I see Jeff is present. I'm just curious, there are 3 driveway cuts on Richfield Parkway here, but what's not shown is a driveway cut that was approved for Plaza 66, and in fact 17th Avenue is shown the way it is, I think, on the ground today, even though part of it was vacated as part of that project. Not knowing where that is exactly, how close is that driveway cut relative to the one-way inbound driveway cut that they're proposing in their parking lot?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Commissioners, there's coordination. We're working with the 2 developers right now to get the same thing shown on the same plans. The driveway for the Plaza 66 would be approximately south of the current island that's out there today, which also you can't really tell from this drawing, but it's basically a cut kind of midway through that first curve. There'll be a cut in the median that will allow full access to the Plaza 66 project.
So is that about, what, 50 feet from the driveway they're proposing, or do you have a ballpark of how close that is?
I don't have an exact measurement, no.
Are there guidelines for, basically I'm concerned about the frequency of driveways across that trail. Are there guidelines for how frequently we should be having driveways across those regional trails?
We have included Three Rivers Park in the plan review, and they don't have any issues as long as the driveway crossings meet their standards. They don't have a standard for how many crossings.
Okay.
It somewhat depends on the volume of those crossings. We try to limit the major volume ones. But considering, that first entrance on this site is a right in, right out, it'll probably be a little bit lower volume. There'll be ingress movements there, but not egress as much.
Just judging by kind of my applying the scale, I would think that driveway cut to Plaza 66 would be at least 120 feet.
Okay.
From the one to the parking lot.
And then 2 other questions related to the trail. One, and it's not shown very clearly in here, but on previous plans it showed only about like 2.5 or 3 feet between the curb and the trail where those parking bays exist. Is there a reason why those are so close? Or I don't know if that's a question more for the developer, but.
Yeah, so that's also something we just met last week for the road portion plan work, and included Three Rivers Park in that meeting. And that was, another concern. They wanted to make sure that there's adequate distance between the door opening and the trail. And so they're will likely shift the trail over somewhat and include the clear space on the building side, so to speak, on the right-of-way side, so that there's adequate space in between the parked cars and their doors and then the trail itself.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question is just about the on-street parking is included in the parking minimum for the building, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so in general, I'm not really concerned about parking. I think our parking requirement is too high. But given that we don't allow parking during winter snow events, how does that work exactly if the building is using that as part of their parking? Is there a special arrangement for this street, or where are our tenants going to put their cars in a snow event?
In terms of, the snow event rules, I would defer to Jeff. But I would say that, the way it's parked, the way it is designed, much of that space is going to be for visitor parking.
Okay.
The underground spaces allow for at least one per unit. So again, the surface parking, particularly the on-street parking, is more for visitor use. Perhaps the hope is that visitor traffic wouldn't coincide with a snow emergency in usual cases.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else have any questions for staff before we open the public hearing? I believe the developer's here. Is there anything you guys would like to come up and say before we open the public hearing?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Steve Schwanke, and I'm with Inland Development Partners. Also here with me tonight are Todd Elkins and Scott Beckman. They're with Urban Works, and these two gentlemen lead our design team. We thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I just have a couple of comments. I promise to be very short. We've had an opportunity to review the staff report, completely support that, and completely support the recommendation for approval, and ask you tonight for that approval. I do want to just take a moment then to talk about, there's been a couple of comments about some of the neighborhood meetings we've held over recent months, actually years, quite frankly, last year, year and a half. And we held our most recent one on July 13th. I know some of you were there, but I wanted to just take a moment and review the results from that. At our neighborhood meetings, for those who were not able to make that, we actually use this as an opportunity to survey people who attend, and we ask them to comment on a number of items. We set those neighborhood meetings up as basically as open houses. So there's no formal presentation. And we have boards up that basically are very similar to the material that you received tonight. And then we have people there like Todd and Scott and some of my partners who were there, and have construction people there. So people can come and go as they want, and they can spend as much time in front of whatever board that they want and talk to anybody as much as they want. And some people are in and out within a minute or two or three, and some people spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour conversing with us. And so it's a very relaxed, informal setting where we have a chance to talk with residents. They have a chance to talk with us about the project. But as part of that, we, again, like I mentioned, we asked them to fill out a little survey for us. So we had about 22, 23 people who attended our last neighborhood meeting on the 13th of July, like I mentioned. We received 10 comments. And we asked just three really very basic questions. The last question is, do you want to provide us with your contact information if you want us to stay in touch with you, if we ever need to get a hold of you? Some provided, some don't. The first question we asked basically is, what do you like about the project? What do you like about what you're seeing? And again, we only had 10 respondents, so this certainly is not scientific by any stretch of the imagination. But there was, without any doubt, with those 10 people responding, there were basically three things that came up again and again and again that they liked, that people kept talking about. One is just the land use itself. A lot of support for the multifamily land use. The second item that came up with a lot of support, and it was referenced a little bit earlier here, I think John talked about it, is the renovation that we're going to be doing, keeping and the renovating of the three existing units that are on the east side of the project, those that are at 6720, 6730, and 6744 Cedar Avenue South. And the staff report goes into a little bit of detail about that. So a lot of support for those efforts. And the third was just the amenities that we're offering as part of this project. They're described in your report. We had a board there that night that went into it a little bit further. Those amenities that got called out quite a bit was the pet area that we're providing. We're providing community gardens as well. You'll see those on the south end. We're adding a playground as well. And we're adding some public art as part of this. And this actually idea came from, I wish I could say we came up with this idea, but we didn't come up with the idea of public art. It was at one of the workshop sessions about a year ago when it was recommended that we add public art, work with the Arts Commission to do that. And so we've made a commitment to do that. We've illustrated on the plans where we think they're best located now. Hopefully we receive your approval, City Council approval, and we'll work more directly with the Arts Commission in defining the best spot for that public art. And then we're also going to add some art on the inside, on the interiors as well to the building. So those were the three things. Again, if there was any general consensus, those three items, there was a lot of support for. We do then ask, what do you think we should spend more time looking at? Or what do you got a concern about? Or what is it that we should add more detail to? And there, two big areas came up, again, without a doubt, a general consensus regarding amongst those 10 respondents. One, there was the traffic, and it's mentioned in your report a little bit. There's concern about the traffic that this project generates, as well as the new retail that is currently constructed on the north side of 66, as well as the proposed retail on the south side of 66. And there's the question about how does this all work together and how does it affect the roundabout and what happens on the parkway going south. So I think staff has commented a little bit about that in your staff report, and Jeff may have a few more comments tonight if there's any additional issues regarding that. The other item that came up is how we're going to handle that buffering between our west side, our west edge of our west side of our property and the existing neighborhood as well to the west. There were a number of people who said they didn't want structural fences. They didn't want fences. They wanted a lot of landscaping and buffering. And so we spent, when we resubmitted our plans here for the meeting tonight, spent some additional time taking a look at that and proposing landscaping in that area as well. And again, we'd be happy to chat more about that if it's your desire. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll take a seat and we look forward to any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is the public hearing. If anybody would like to get up and speak, you can come up, state your name and address, and sign in. We'll just go over some guidelines and rules here quick so everyone's on the same page. You get 5 minutes to speak. If you have a representative that wants to speak for a group of you, they get 10 minutes to speak, so they get a little bit longer. If you kind of want to have one person coming together, just let me know that you are a representative for your group. And then this is just a time for statements. After we're done with the statements, if there are questions, we will stand for 30 minutes, and you can ask questions through myself, of the applicant, of staff, and of the commissioners. Nope, this is just a time for statements. So according to our guidelines that we just approved last time, so reapproved. So you can make a statement, and then you can ask questions when statements are done.
Okay. My name is Rosie Heinrich. I live at 6638 16th Avenue South. I guess my statement would be, I'm confused to why the city would take an area that was designated for 32 homes and plop 300 and some apartment units in that area. The traffic alone will be insane. 17th Avenue is closed. 16th Avenue, you've decided to build a new coffee shop and a restaurant with a drive-through that encompassed 4 homes. And now you're going to take 30-some homes and build 300 and some units. Is that correct? The apartment building will have 300 and some units? Oh, I'm sorry. I couldn't ask a question. Sorry. So the east side of Richfield from Cedar to Bloomington is going to become inundated with traffic. There's no way around it. It's going to come. And we have to live through that. So my plea again, I want 16th Avenue to be a dead end. I want you to separate the residential from the commercial. And you're going to need to figure out where you're going to put all these people that are going to be, I mean, an apartment building does not house one person. A unit doesn't house one person. You can have 3 people living in an apartment. They could all have a car. You could have 4 people living in that unit, and all 4 of them could have a car. They could have company coming in. They're all going to have cars. And you're going to have cars and cars and cars and cars. And they got to go somewhere. They got to drive somewhere. They got to park somewhere. They have to have a place to park when there's snow removal issues as well. I would like to see you go back to the townhouse. That seems to fit the area a whole lot better. I'm sorry, no disrespect, than a huge complex filled with apartments. Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Anybody next? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jean Beaver. I live at 6701 17th Avenue. I live on the corner house where there's going to be the underground parking right at the end within just 100 feet of my driveway. There's going to be a dog park back there, and I do own a dog that loves other dogs. And there's going to be a pool that's going to be right across the street from my house. And I've just never seen complexes that build all of their amenities facing all of the residential properties. Usually they're more contained, or there isn't single-family homes there. I was going to touch on the traffic that she mentioned. I did some statistics with citydata.com. The index, they say that 77% of people drive to work solo in their car. So my understanding is every bedroom that's in there is going to have an underground parking spot. So if there's 280 some people in these 3 apartments, plus the existing one, which, like I said, I've lived there for 30 years. I have 3 children that have had friends that live there, and there are more than just a family living in those homes with multiple cars. And I've seen renderings 3 different times from the developers. And this last one kind of really threw me off because now there's a median. There's not only, I was thinking from the last meeting that I never saw these 2 gentlemen there and didn't get to ask all these questions and have them all answered. I kind of got a lot of like, oh, I don't know. Didn't get a lot of questions answered, actually. So there's a median and there's 2-way parking, and there's parking on both sides. So you've got parking underground, you've got parking on 2 sides of a street, and then each apartment building has parking within that unit. The air quality index, which I've never seen stats on that before, in Richfield, this is all, you don't have, there's no 2017. This one is from 2013. When I moved there, the airport was 2.5 miles, and I didn't move it. Now it's 2.5 blocks from my house, the new runway. But it's 90.2, and that's worse than the average of the United States of 74.7. The average household is 2.4 in Richfield, which in Minnesota is 2.5, so that's similar. Another thing too is when you have people coming into the cities, this is going to draw in a lot of people into the cities, the crime goes up. We have a lot of crime happening that is related to the apartments back there. So to put more rental units, we have collectively a couple hundred years of people that have lived within the 2 blocks that it's going to be impacting the most. I mean, Building B that is directly behind my house is not up to code, and they're going to ask to fix that, to change some laws so that they can continue with their plan. For 20 years, the city's intentions were to build townhomes there, and then behind there have the 3-story for the buffers, because all of the buffers are gone. I can see the airport come and go, the airplanes come and go. So to have, the apartments as buffers, but right by our homes have the townhomes. I had my house appraised recently, and the appraiser said that the home values will more than likely go down with the apartment. Townhomes in there will maintain the value and increase. There's a 3.1% increase in 2018. That's the projected market for next year. So you put in, apartments down there. I would say most people, that's their largest investment, is their property. So I'm here protecting my property this has been many times that I have come here to protect my property. You keep coming in my backyard, and you're going to make this, the air quality index, I'm sure, is going to change after you put the underground parking with cars coming and going constantly. And as far as buffers, I don't remember. I think there was something mentioned about some lilac bushes. But other than that, a 6-foot fence or lilac bushes, I don't think that's really going to, protect. And it's the noise and just everything.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Risa Paul. I'm at basically the corner of 67th and 16th. As Rosie said, we're also affected by the Plaza 66. There will be a commercial driveway on 16th Avenue. We're going to have to deal with that traffic as well. And 66, when it's all said and done, it will be a one-lane through each way. We're adding 10 new businesses, 280 new rental units. I don't see how it's going to work without impacting our neighborhood even more than it already has been. I think we saw a really good good product of that when they closed 66. We had to call and complain and actually put up our own barriers when they closed 66 because people came and used 67. And that's the way it's going to be with all this new development over here. Townhomes, I think, I love the idea of townhomes. No disrespect to your plan. I think it creates a good buffer, which was in the comprehensive plan. And it also has a good transition from single family to the bigger, taller buildings. And I ask that you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Anybody else? Yes, come on up.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is James Rudolph, 6726 17th Avenue South. I am a longtime resident. I've lived in Richfield 21 years. I've volunteered with the city many times, most recently with John Stark on a housing, this very topic. You know, many of the things that we talked about then were having high density housing with medium density housing in between of low density housing. And, you know, this is something that I think that's been in the comprehensive plan for many years, to have that transition between high density and low density. I think that's something that really needs to stay in this plan and to keep into consideration. We did a lot of work a couple years ago with John on this very topic, and we worked for many weekends, many nights, talking about that with many different people within the community. And I think that really is something that we all agreed on, that you need to have a buffer between high density and low density. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, just so I'm clear, one person at a time.
Yep, we're a group.
Your group. Okay, you get
Yep.
10 minutes. You're the spokesperson.
So my name is Liz Barris. And this is Michael Federico, my partner at 6732 17th Avenue, and my neighbor.
I'm Mike Woodward. I live at 6733 17th Avenue.
We bought our house knowing that this was in the works. I'm an architect. My fiance is a contractor, so it's our nature to obviously appreciate development and support it. Essentially, we're not opposed to this development. However, participating in several community involvements on the JLG's master plan and for 2004 and 2016. With that said, based on our knowledge, we feel that this proposal actually falls short in multiple ways and would argue against the approval. One, there's a lack of transitions both in vertically, like physically, as well as horizontally due to activity density. And I'll go into more detail. Pulling out of September 2004 master plan, page 28, the design statement, design recommendations illustrated transition from new office and service buildings developed along the eastern edge to help bring additional employment opportunities to the community. Also act as to mitigate some of the negative impacts of the airport. Second statement I'd like to pull out, same chapter, to have a step down from large scale to smaller scale and a slower pace to the single family. We feel that the current proposal is a plop-down development, not taking into account the overall transitions, but in fact taking land ultimately that will impact any other development through the personal or business development on Cedar Avenue. For instance, demonstrating that vinocopia, apologize for the pronunciation.
You can actually put it right there, and then the camera can pick it up. So right in front of the other computer.
Right in front of
You can see the camera up there. There you go. Thank you.
So I just wanted to emphasize that by basically leaving this property as it is, I would argue that basically shifting, as was noted by city staff, to the west doesn't allow businesses to acquire. There's only a sliver left here, and then it's not prime opportunities anymore for businesses to utilize double vacant or double lots. Additionally, I'd like to pull out of the September 2004, page 11 master plan, Cedar Avenue. These uses are more compatible with the noise and activity of the airport and may even benefit by and designed to block the sound. So that's regarding those business blocks. Pulling from the master plan 2016, the definition of mixed use, which essentially so regarding what the city staff said about the multi-use being in purple, and then the MR, which is medium residential, in orange. So the purple, which is mixed use, is defined as development refers to the integration of residential, commercial, retail, employment, civic, recreation, and education uses in a way that not only supports and enhances each element in the development, but provides residents in surrounding neighborhoods to rich and diverse environment in which to live, work, shop, play, and learn. So essentially, moving down to that understanding, I understand that we can't have necessarily the first level retail like similar Minneapolis streets. However, I think there's a lack of business proponent to this work-live balance. Based on the, so going into the density component, so based on the county parcel information that I found on the Hennepin County website, the medium density is 7 to 12 units per acreage. Essentially, based on the calculations I did, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're about 7.5 acres proposed. So if we take the medium density west of the parkway, which is about 4 acres at 7 to 12 units, that's about 30 to 50 units on that where proposed building B is. Ultimately, if we were to take in the fact that that density wouldn't take over that multi-use, there would be no more than 150 if we took that the high density incorporation. So that's significantly half of what's being proposed. My challenge of this is, what are we gaining with all these units besides what my neighbors have pointed out about traffic, noise, and the list goes on. I think that some takeaways is, if this is truly geared towards young professionals, that there has to be also needs for walkable work opportunities. Also, I work downtown, and the bus lines aren't adequate for the intensity of users that will work downtown, which I think is geared towards young professionals. Another thing I wanted to comment about the half block west of the Parkway medium density is to help transition density from mixed use development areas to existing single family residential homes. And that predominantly is stated in the master plan of 2016 as predominantly townhomes and condominiums ranging from 7 to 12 units per acre. And I think that's really important. Lastly, just feedback on the actual design itself. Currently, the roof pitch right now adds a whole nother story to the overall height. I believe the same aesthetics may be achieved in a shallower roof pitch, while at the same time being sensitive to the scale of neighboring one-story single fams, which tend to be below 612. Also, I believe there's an opportunity to be creative with the site plan and construction staging to save a few, especially the mature trees, which are probably original to Richfield establishments. Also, there's some suggestion on that vegetation buffer. I think that's absolutely important. It is important that those that are on that were originally part of that east side development, which includes Mike's home and along with his neighbors, that were originally part of the proposal and now are back to this development, that there's now a sight line from 3 stories down to 1. And regardless of the vegetation, I think there needs to be a high concentration and attention to that buffer, because the sight lines are there that I don't think are actually being considered. Do you have anything else to share?
I don't have any specific points. Just that, yeah, my house backs up right to where one of the 3-story buildings is proposed, and it is definitely. I was excited about the new development and the townhome proposal. Not really excited about the 3-story, basically in my backyard. So other than that, don't have anything to say. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
My name is Judith Montgomery, and I've lived in my house for 25 years. Personally, I'm going to say it, and probably for everybody else too, I hate the idea. The crime rate is a big worry. Biggest point being that I've watched the drug trade and watched the amount of traffic with the police that's happened with the apartments that currently exist. Also seen it on my own street corners. As far as the traffic that's going up and down 18th, part of this development is basically taking my front yard. I have not seen in writing that eminent domain is actually going to happen or not happen. I haven't seen a letter stating that, no, we're not taking your house. But according to what the plan is, my front yard, my neighbors, everybody else is going to be gone. So, you know, those of us that are, you know, either single, widowed, whatever, that are trying to keep our houses because there's nothing else that we can afford, even with a buyout and turning the money over, it's still not affordable for us to do that with, you know, the way things are planned. As far as the crime rate as well, my personal vehicles and my friends in front of my house and in my own driveway have been broken into 8 times. So, and then when you try to make a report on it, or can you dust my car for fingerprints? Well, we've got a report. We, you know, have an idea how this is happening, but we have no guarantee that our area is going to be safe. Also, with you don't know who's going to be coming in and who's actually going to be renting. And I've watched my neighbors get their garages tagged with gang stuff painted on the side of their garages going down 68th Street. You know, it's that many people in that area to have our quiet neighborhood go from what it is now to what it's going to be is totally unacceptable. And as far as the roundabout goes there, since, you know, Home Depot and Target have been put in, trying to get across the street, walking across where that roundabout is, you literally take your life in your hands. And that goes for the same up on Portland Avenue as well. The way that the traffic comes through, everybody that goes through there wants to be first. Since the traffic lights came out, the way that the traffic goes, and it's try to get across Portland Avenue or across Nicollet, since all of this is single lane, there's barely a break in the traffic to do that. It's very difficult to walk your dog. It's very difficult to take your children for a walk. You know, I just don't see how this is going to make our community better and safer when there's going to be a lot of chaos happening and contributing to the chaos that's happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Next.
My name is Paul Lair, and I am the building owner that is at 6607 18th Avenue South, which is on the corner of 66th Street and 18th Avenue, which sits nicely appointed next to the beautifully remodeled Richfield liquor store. Had the privilege of owning that building for 18 some years, along with the privilege of paying $20-some thousand a year in property taxes. In so doing, similar to my neighbor, I just want to say that I have had multiple instances in that neighborhood, and I've kept up my building very nice. That we've had tagging, we've had the property vandalized, I've had break-ins, where I've got probably about 15 suites in the building. They've been broken into. There's been stealing from the property during both daytime and nighttime. And any time I've spoken with the Richfield police, which have been, in my opinion, very responsive, they oftentimes will cite the fact that they know that the crime is coming from the apartments. So on one hand, I'm glad to hear that some of those apartments are going to be renovated. I think that's a great idea. On the other hand, I think the thought of adding more apartments, and I'm going to cite now something from the Star Trib, and I don't know if it was sources are accurate or not, but they had said that 20% of the apartments are geared towards low income, which I know most cities are needing to kind of step up and do their part in low income housing, and that the other 80%, and I believe I'm quoting this accurately, was going to be geared towards below market rate, which in my mind, for the concerns that are cited about trying to keep some of the riffraff out, I'm not sure why we're going to build a beautiful facility with nice amenities and then gear towards below market rental rates. Was confusing to me. And then my second comment is, I guess I have a concern, and I talked to John about this. And over the years, anytime I've talked to John, he's been absolutely helpful to me about these kinds of things. But attending the neighborhood presentation and looking at the boards, the road, if you look at that little road now that is 18th Avenue South from 66th Street that goes down to where the 3 new apartments are going to be, that road was not on any of the boards, which I guess concerned me a little bit in the sense of I don't know how customers are going to get into the dental building and our office building if the road disappears. So I just want to state that we need a road, and that I hope that that is modified in any of the site plans that are going to be looked at in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Is there anybody else?
We have since,
Okay, that doesn't necessarily address this housing unit, so
it does because of the fact of how many people are going to be there and the shopping carts that are all around our neighborhood coming from that area, and a lot of them end up at the apartment buildings.
okay.
Thank
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, would you like to come up?
Hi, my name is Christine Wheeler. I'm at 6638 17th Avenue, and we're going to be directly across from the plan of these apartments. And I just had heard as well that low-income housing, and I just would ask for a reconsideration of apartments there because we know that there is, we feel that we can restore those units that are already there rather than build new facilities that are apartments. I'm not necessarily opposed to townhomes being right directly across, but just, hearing from the neighbors who've been here for 30 years, we just moved in last year. We came from like I had mentioned before in the last meeting, we came from from South Dallas, Oak Cliff, where literally across the street was the mafia. We don't want that here in front of us again. We feel that Richfield is like a very peaceful place, and just keeping the community, you know, and listening to the neighbors that have been here for 30 plus years. I mean, they're genuinely concerned. And then as far as the traffic, we got a glimpse of that these past couple weeks when we actually physically, my son cannot ride his bike in front of our yard. His friend was one of the homes at the end of the block on 17th where there's like the dead end, and they could freely ride their bikes up and down. And, you know, I'm out there to watch, but these last 2 weeks, I think it's been 2.5, 3 weeks or so, not at all. He can't even go outside because of the cars and the traffic that's already there just from 66th and all of that being shut down, and going on to 16th Avenue and then them backing it up to, you know, Bloomington or whatever, all of that construction. So for us, that was my main concern, is coming to this place, having a young child who couldn't actually go out in our neighborhood before because of what was going on in front of us, and then coming here to such a peaceful place, you know, and just that road being closed, and that there's so much traffic, and, you know, we had to put our own signs up. People are just, they're driving 50 miles per hour down the road to a dead end. And so I just would reconsider, you know, having that amount of apartments, you know, that number of people in that small area is, I mean, I can see that there being townhomes, but that amount of people in that area, plus the 10 businesses, and it's just, and we like to walk. We walk to Chipotle today, and, you know, we can physically do that. I know a lot of the neighbors are like, you fear for your life, but we have a plan for that, you know, but this is going to add so much more traffic. So we just would ask that you would just maybe, as a community, we can restore, you know, some of those other buildings that are already there. Maybe there's things that we can do to further that instead of just having a whole new 300 unit apartments. And that's kind of what we are. We're a ministry, One Heart Ministries. We're from our home, and our heart is really to, you know, help the community in those ways. So that's just my proposal. And I agree with my neighbors. They've been here for a long time, and we've seen a difference. And so anyhow, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Anyone? Okay, so we will reset this for, I'll put 30 minutes on here, to ask questions, all right? So if you guys have questions, come on up. You can direct questions through me. I'll repeat them for the records so that we can ask, and then we can get some questions that you guys have answered. Anybody want to come up and ask a question? Yeah? Okay, come on up.
I kind of alluded to this in my calculations based on the units per acre. My question is what are we gaining by increasing that amount of units into this area and contradicting the whole master plan that we had kind of done that scale of transitions, as I mentioned?
Thank you. Staff, can you address the note to the master plan as far as scale of step down?
And then the quantity of units, because the 712 unit per acre.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. And I think it might make sense to take a step back. I had talked about the study that was commissioned by the city, MAC, and the FAA that concluded that the single-family homes could not withstand the impact of low-frequency noise. When I talk to people about low-frequency noise, whether this is a good way to describe it or not, this is the way I've chosen. It's kind of like when you pull up at a stoplight next to a car that's got their radio going, and if they're playing a heavy bass kind of music, you don't hear the singer singing. You hear the bass. You feel the bass. Really, that's what this low-frequency noise is. The Metropolitan Airports Commission has had a process for soundproofing homes for overflight noise. The study concluded that the soundproofing for overflight noise did not address the concerns with low-frequency noise that's this close to an airport. The runway, the north-south runway, at the time it was built, was closer to an existing single-family neighborhood than any major airport in the United States. So the study concluded that the homes should be removed because they couldn't withstand noise impacts thus they were removed. But B, that sizable structures without a lot of breaks, without a lot of gaps, needed to replace those. And when we say sizable, they talked about being at least 3 stories in height. Like I said, not a lot of gaps, so long buildings. And so I know people have asked about townhouses repeatedly. That was never the long-term plan for this to be entirely developed with townhomes. The hope was and continues to be that townhomes can be a transition from the 3+ story buildings that block the low frequency noise from penetrating into the neighborhood. So the transition between those kinds of uses and the existing single family homes. So the question is kind of what are we gaining? And we're gaining what we set out to do in 2002, and that is to have 3+ story buildings without a lot of breaks that can block the low frequency noise.
So what I'm hearing your answer is that the step down theory was always 3 stories, 2 townhomes, and this is the 3-story portion.
Correct.
The townhome is the buffer that we're missing.
Yes.
That is where the current single-family homes are.
Right. So the block that has the
No, that's the sliver that was referred to by staff as MR.
Can we pull it up?
MR2.
Yeah, so if the AV person, there we go. So again, on the left, where it says current, which it should say previously from 2004 to 2016, the dark brown was MR3 high density multifamily, which is apartment building kinds of uses. In 2016, it was re-guided to have that half block be a transition. That was when we were in a process with the developer of working through their site plan, trying to make our comprehensive plan a fit with some realistic proposals that we'd received. So for the last year plus, it has shown a lower density in that strip. The hope now would be to shift that, and if there are willing sellers along the strip on 17th, the plan is to talk with developers about a townhome transition at that location. Again, the preserving of the 3 apartment buildings is really what pushed this all further to the west than would have been ideal. You know, I would say, just generally speaking.
Can we zoom up a little so I can see the key to this? Is that possible?
And the file actually, it's saved in the, if you minimize the packet, I do have that
Thank
map
you.
available to commissioners if you'd like to pull it up as well.
Okay.
And when you think about a plan such as the 2004 plan or the 2006 plan, you know, it's really a continuum. It starts with a grand vision at one end, which is very broad. There's a conceptual plan or a master plan then that gives it a little bit more detail. But we know that there needs to be some flexibility in that plan. So then the next level is the regulations, the zoning ordinance that tries to accommodate what's in the plan in a way that provides some flexibility for dealing with market demand. And that's the point we're at tonight, is the regulatory side of it. And then, you know, as you go further down that continuum, there's the economic realities, the development realities. This area has been vacant for 14 or 15 years. Originally, as was noted in the 2004 plan, there was a desire for office space there. As we continue to evaluate that with the office vacancy rates in the Twin City and the rates that those are being absorbed by users, the number we had received was there's a 15-year period of time for the vacancies to be absorbed by the market. So it could be another 10 to 15 years if the ultimate goal is to wait for office development.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? There may be some disagreement about what comp
yes.
plan we're looking at, right? And I know that the original one that I think you pulled up in your phone from 2014, it looked MR2 orange.
It's the same.
Okay.
It's just a different. It's what that was updated April 2017. So I don't know understand why they're not using the most updated plan. However, this whole shifting for these existing apartments and sacrificing the due diligence that our city staff and JLG did to get that transition study, I don't understand why we're giving up that MD2 in part of their scheme. It should be incorporated in part of their scheme to get that transition, whether or not it was keeping the existing apartments in themselves. I just don't understand, and what I'm asking about gaining is what are we gaining by keeping the existing and then pummeling even all the units with high density when indeed the master plan doesn't state that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions? Rosalie, I believe you had a question. Yes.
I had a question about the crime rates and how you said that there was going to be something with the crime safety and trying to prevent stuff. But right now that area is pretty bad. So
Yes.
how are they going to actually make it better by putting in, 300 to 600 more people than is already there?
Thank you. Can I ask the developer to come up to talk more about that aspect and the work you have done looking into that?
So, thank you for that opportunity. Actually, we think one of the problems reason for crime in this area is the lack of activity in this area. You've got 7 acres of wide open land out there. But all you've got to do is come off Cedar Avenue or 494, go do your drug deal, jump back on. No one's there. So that's one of the things we think we're actually going to be addressing with this, is the crime that is going on in the area. We're going to be doing it in a couple of ways. First of all, it is going to be by putting new development in this area, taking that 7 acres of vacant, no eyes on the land, no one watching it, and actually putting a number of people there with 24-hour management, 24-hour maintenance, with the design, so as we referred to it, eyes on the street, eyes in the backyard, eyes in the front yard. It's going to be real hard now to come do a drug deal. It's going to be real hard now to tag somebody. It's going to be real hard to commit vandalism in an adjacent neighborhood without someone seeing you. I mean, look at the design. Try and do crime in that area and not have someone see you. In addition to having a regional trail going through there that people are using in this entire area of this metropolitan area, sidewalks, connecting, things of that nature. So that's one of the big things that we actually think we'll bring here is a deterrent to existing crime. Existing crime.
Thank you.
One line, if I could just, and I do want to, then I'll sit down, I'll stop at this, but we also think one of the benefits of this is the 24-hour management, 24-hour maintenance. There are going to be people here all the time within each of the respective buildings, at the main building. And then one last thing, we have, and I can go into further detail if you'd like, but Saturday Properties is going to be our management company, very experienced management company, very rigorous screening criteria. So we think all of those combined are going to go a long ways to benefit the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair of Rosie Heinrich.
Yes.
Yeah, I did speak with police representatives about the crime concerns because I'd heard them as well. They had told me a couple of things. One is, as Mr. Schwanke alluded to, their feeling on crime at multifamily is that it's 100% correlated to management, how well a property is managed, 100% correlation. They said that they feel like that there is almost a 0% correlation between your status of tenancy. And I asked the officer what they meant by that, and they said, well, the officer said, I myself have been both a renter and a homeowner. And he said, John, I'm guessing you rented a house at some point in your life or an apartment. And he just categorically did not believe that people that were in a rental situation were more disposed to committing crime than people in a home ownership situation.
Thank you. Yes, you had a question. My timer stopped working, so I restarted it, so we have a little more time.
So I guess I just want to ask the question about if indeed the Star Tribune article was accurate, that the 80% of the occupancy was being geared towards below market rate. Why is that the case, and is it the Planning Commission's support to do so?
Thank you. Can you speak about that 80% below market rate to the developer?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. I'm not quite sure where the Star Tribune got. I saw the same article. I certainly understand. I cringed myself. So no, that is not true. So this is, we do have 20% of the units, and this is consistent with city policy, that are geared towards affordable renters. Now, what's an affordable renter? And it's based on the average metropolitan income here. But this is basically people who are making lower 40s to lower 50s, thousands a year. These are your police officers. These are your teachers. These are your sons. These are your daughters. So it would be a misnomer to refer to it, and I do not mean this negatively, but it would be wrong to refer to this as low income. This is affordable housing, very along the lines I just talked about. The other 80%, this is market rate. This is me. This is Todd. I would imagine, we would hope this might be some of you. So 80% will be market rate.
Am I correct that you're reaching that 20% by keeping those 3 existing units and rehabbing that, and that's where your intended 20% is?
Yeah, and there's a lot, that's correct. I mean, the current tenants, I guess it would be fair to say in general, fit that affordable category. So we do, and then we think that's one of the benefits that we're being able to provide as part of this proposed development is we'll go in there, we're going to rehab those units. We're going to provide the same amenity package to those people that anyone else on this property gets. And again, you see that on your list there. And those units now, and nothing against the current property owners, they're great people. But we think we'll, again, with the 24-hour management, 24-hour maintenance, we think we'll be able to do a little bit better job.
Thank you.
Chair Daniels, just
Yes.
to clarify on the affordable housing counts, I believe that the 20% requirement for the entire complex results in a number of 63 affordable units. The 3 existing buildings house 33 units, so that would mean that 30 additional units would be scattered amongst the 3 new buildings.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Yeah, come on up. Race for the mic.
So you said something about the MAC that 1 3-story building, no break. Was that what the study came out to be?
The study, a story isn't a standard measurement. There are different heights.
12 feet, roughly.
Yeah, you're asking for my
I'm just saying, I'm asking you to reiterate what you said when my wife was up there.
Right. My recollection is that the study, the 2000 MAC FAA Richfield low frequency noise study, called out a minimum of 35 feet of height for continuous walled construction.
Okay. So if there's going to be 1 along 77 Cedar, then why is there going to be another 3-story right behind it? Why not? Oh.
Yeah. And a lot of this is based on market conditions and what a developer can accomplish on the site or can't. That's the proposal we have before us.
So you're saying to meet, can I ask a question? So to meet the step down, we could have the 3-story, a townhome, and then the existing houses within the space that we're looking at. That would meet the step down requirements as well. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then, sorry, I got another one. Our wonderful city engineer just redid all of 66. So from Portland all the way to 16th is pretty much going down to one lane both directions, with this added traffic going in there, how's that gonna play out?
Can I
Who's gonna
clarify? I don't believe
redo
that was the city, that was the county, correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioners. Yeah, it's a county project, but the city was equal partner in the planning and design of that road. It's kind of a misconception that a 3-lane road handles less capacity than a 4-lane undivided, especially with a lot of.
I've worked with MnDOT for 10 years, so I know this.
And this, yeah, so this is actually coming from MnDOT.
Side lane is basically what it's called.
Okay, you have to let him, you asked a question, you have to let him answer it.
Right. So if you look at the capacities of a 4-lane undivided with multiple driveways, which we have on 66th Street, as well as a 3-lane, which is a lane in each direction with a center turn lane, the capacities in this situation are about equal. So we have been doing conversions of our 4-lane undivided around the city to 3-lane where those volumes make sense. So in the planning process with the county actually used, you don't design a road for the current conditions, you design it for 20 years out. So they used our comp plans and assumed full development and came up with a increased volume on 66th Street. We felt they were increasing it too much, but even with that increase that they projected, 3-lane handled that capacity no problem. So, with the roundabout, which handles a greater capacity more efficiently than a signal, as well as a 3-lane, I don't anticipate any of this development will cause a concern. Additionally, most of the traffic, if you look and analyze the traffic coming and going from the development on the east side, a bulk of it is coming from and going to Trunk Highway 77.
Right.
Now, you don't have to agree with his answer either.
No,
Sorry,
I do.
So,
I know this
Fair.
because I've done 2 classes with the Richfield city engineer, and who's top. So I know that he's part of the
It was actually our transportation engineer, Jack Brose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I was all for what he was doing. I was part of the VE study through MnDOT that went into this, but I didn't know if the high density that's across from Target, if that was taken into account, this proposal was taken into account, because those figures weren't given to us.
Yep, and that's a great question. Because these are things that are new since the design of 66th Street, but I think that it's important to note that, when the county was designing 66th Street, they're using 20-year projections that, assuming this is fully developed, based on our comp plan, which was, a higher density there.
Okay,
So.
thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
Do you have figures as to what the city is going to gain as far as the tax base with these apartments, and what's going to happen with our property taxes? Is this going to make them go up, or is it going to make them go down?
Can you answer that? I know we don't usually talk about taxes.
Yeah,
in this
just a
matter.
caution. I can talk as much as folks would like about taxes or tax increment financing or other financing issues.
But we can't consider it as
you
part
can't
of
consider
our,
that. That's
yes.
not part of the zoning ordinance.
But I'll answer your question.
Yeah, even with this being a tax increment financing area, which it is and has been since 2004 or 5, and this gets complicated, but in a TIF district, the tax increment, which is the money that can go to a developer to reimburse some of their costs, is the new taxes over and above what was already being paid there. And so in theory, it shouldn't take away any of the previous taxes. In this case, it's actually even better for the city of Richfield. The way they calculate a TIF district, if there's non-taxable land, is that they would apply what its value should have been. And so for the past 12 or 15 years, the city of Richfield's been gaining no property tax off of any of this vacant land. When it's a TIF district, the county will go ahead and figure out what we should have been getting in property taxes for this vacant land, and that's what we will be receiving in the future. And then the tax increment financing would be anything above that. The HRA, the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, is going to be working on determining how much of the tax increment financing would go to the developer, how much would go back to the city for other uses, there is also some public money going into the roadway as well.
And I believe her second question was, what will this do to your taxes, if you can answer
Correct.
that?
What's gonna happen to the property tax for the residents existing?
Yeah. So the way, and property taxes in Minnesota are among the most complicated anywhere. The short answer is it really shouldn't have any effect one way or the other. A city determines its tax levy first, and so the tax levy is, in the millions of dollars to pay for all the city services. So the tax levy is set. Then the assessor determines a value for everybody's home. We have in the past, and we hear this often, that this is going to make my property values go down. We've heard that frequently. We've done some studies on existing projects in Richfield, and that has never been the case. But there, these projects aren't apples and apples, so I can't tell you we have a project just like this. But we have asked the assessors in this case whether they would anticipate the assessed values of any of the homes going down in this area, and they say no. And so you've got the tax levy, which is the grand total that's collected by the city. You've got the tax, the assessed value of everybody's individual home, and mathematically then they figure out what your tax rate is going to be to make up for that. And so the tax rate is going to change from time to time. But really what the important thing is the tax levy. That goes up by 3, 5, 7% a year. And so if your market value remained the same, your taxes should go up an equal amount, 3, 5, 7%. If your property value were to go down, your proportion of the property taxes would go down. I don't know. It is very complicated, but my end answer is no, it shouldn't have any impact whatsoever on people's individual property taxes on their properties.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Come on up. We've got 14 minutes left.
I kind of have a couple questions.
Let's start one at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah.
First question. The Pines on Lindale and 60 Wentworth,
Pines, like
they don't have affordable housing in there. So is this something that Richfield picks and chooses where they have affordable housing?
Can you talk to the affordable housing, the 20% that we have as a guideline? I believe it's a guideline.
Correct. The Pines was constructed in 99 or 2000, and I don't recall whether they were required to have affordable housing or not. I don't recall.
Okay.
I can tell you that 100% of the multifamily housing that's been built since then has had at least 20% affordable housing, or they dedicate 20% of the tax increment that the project generates to provide affordable housing elsewhere in the community. And so the Pines would have been one of those two. It would have either had 20% of its housing affordable, or it would have donated, for lack of a better word, 20% of its tax increment financing for us to spend on affordable housing elsewhere in the community.
And so that designation happens when the project is built, not just when we approve it to redesignate everything. Does that make sense?
Okay. And is it true that the low frequency noise can withstand a brick or cement building? Not necessarily the height, it's what the structure is made out of?
Do you know that?
It's two different things we're talking about. One is what the building itself can withstand, and the other is what is the building doing to block it from penetrating into the neighborhood. What the building can withstand, it's two different things. It's the material on the outside of the building, so brick or stone, yes, it can better. But it's also the framing of the construction. And in the case of the single-family homes out there, it's all 2x4 exterior framing. And the study concluded that 2x4 exterior framing, even with brick or stonework on the outside of it, was problematic for low-frequency noise.
Okay, thank you.
I just kind of wanted to read the answer that they had given 15 years ago to that question, if I may.
Sure.
Although the homes on the north of 66th Street were insulated for the flight noise under the Metropolitan Airports Commission Part 150 insulation program, their proximity to the new north-south runway negates the effectiveness of the insulation program. Many of the homes are only 1,200 feet from the new runway. The closest a runway has ever been built to an existing neighborhood. Moreover, noise experts agree that the Part 150 retrofits on homes for overflight noise and in no way address low-frequency noise impacts. Low-frequency noise mitigation requires different building modifications, including extra thick walls or creating a significant airspace between two walls.
Thank you. Do you have
And
any
it
other
also-
questions?
One other addition.
Yeah.
Redevelopment would consist of large this is development concepts and future funding for this area. Redevelopment would consist of large non-residential structures of airport-compatible uses that could withstand low-frequency noise and provide a buffer for remaining homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions that we can answer? Yeah, come on up.
Who are you trying to protect by building this?
Okay.
Out of curiosity, I'm the homeowner on 16th Avenue, and you talk about building these apartments, you're building this buffer, you're building all these things to protect us from noise, and yet you're going to add 300 and some more people to our neighborhood, and that's just the people that are projected to live there, and that's only one person per unit.
Okay, so you asked your question.
Yeah, I would say that when the 2000 noise study was done and when the 2004 master plan was done, the purpose of redeveloping this area was to build larger, taller, longer buildings to prevent low-frequency noise waves from penetrating into the neighborhood to the west of the runway. That was the intent at that time.
Okay, and yet we've lived since 2004 without that, and we've all survived.
Is that a question?
I'll make it a question. So building these apartment buildings is going to protect us from more noise? Airport noise? My question is this going to protect us from airport noise? Is that the plan, was that it was supposed to protect us from airport noise?
Am I correct in saying that that would be one part of this proposal? The other part is the economic development of the area.
I would say that the original impetus was blocking the noise. And certainly there are other, as the planning process went forward, there were other benefits and negatives that were identified at that time. But the impetus, the whole reason for starting this redevelopment process in the late 90s was because the airport chose to remain where it was at as opposed to moving south of the river. There was a concern about how the airport remaining would impact houses. The answer was and I'm not an acoustical engineer. We hired the #1 acoustical engineer in the Midwest at that time to study it, and the answer was that the existing single-family homes couldn't withstand the impacts of low-frequency noise, and that new construction should be put in to block low-frequency noise from penetrating into that neighborhood. And having received the study, I don't think the city saw any alternative at that time.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any other questions?
Was that study done prior to the, now the airplanes are required to have, they've been redesigned so that they're not as noisy, that they don't give off as much noise when they take off and they land. So you keep referring to a study from 2004, but yet the airplanes themselves have been redesigned for that exact purpose, to emit less noise and et cetera. So my question is this still a needed buffer in 2017 moving forward?
I think that's the question we're all here to answer tonight. So.
Yeah, I would just say that the MAC and the FAA have changed their studies over time for overflight noise as the technologies have changed. They did not change their studies for low frequency noise. I would presume that they're tracking the noise characteristics of the airplanes. That's the reason that they made the changes for the overflight noise, but that those changes would not have affected the low frequency noise.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I live there, so I feel like I would know if that's.
Do you have a question?
How do you know that that's?
How do you know that they
going to
haven't put out another
affect
study?
me or not affect me, the change?
I'm just relying on the study from the FAA.
So we know that they
and
haven't done
and the
another study.
MAC.
Have they done another study since 2004?
No, the FAA and MAC have not done another study on low
Okay.
frequency noise.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yeah.
You had mentioned that it was recommended for new construction in that study. So if we're doing the renovations of the existing, can I have a better understanding of what we're doing to the existing apartments to address that concern as far as noise mitigation?
Yeah.
If indeed it's proposed to keep those?
I would say that is presuming that those do not currently. Is that true? Do they not currently meet those noise?
Yeah, the noise study, as far as I know, that was done on the low frequency noise concluded that the construction type of for the single family homes with 2x4 exterior construction, largely wooden exteriors couldn't withstand the low frequency noise. That study did not look at commercial or multifamily ability to withstand the noise.
Okay. So I think we don't have an answer for that, but thank you. We have 4 minutes left. Is there any other questions? Yeah, come on up.
It's always been my understanding going back the last 20 years, including the time that, this leads into a question, including the time that I worked on a group that studied housing stock in the city and presented a plan to the city council a couple years ago. Part of that included a plan to always have step-down stock between high-density housing and low-density housing. And it's always been my understanding that this plan included the same thing. I don't see that in this plan. I see the plan change for the sake of a developer. Where is that going to be added into this plan?
Can you clarify what your exact question is? Sorry.
So my question is high density to low density transition. There is no high density to medium density to low density transition in this plan. It goes straight from high density to low density.
So is your question, why does it?
Why is this not in the plan? Because it was always slated in the development of this area.
Okay. Can you answer that?
Well, a couple of things. I don't have the work that came out of the housing visioning group here in front of me.
Yeah.
And I can't access that drive on the computer, so I don't know. I don't recall if it specifically talked about a step down. I guess I would say that the 2004 through 16 plan didn't show a step down from high density to the single family. So historically, that wasn't the case in this area. In a ideal planning world, I would agree with you that that is ideal. And we would, as I said, we'll be working with discussing with the 8 homeowners on that half block, whether they have a desire to be part of a development area or not. If so, that's an area that we would pursue with a townhome developer to provide that step down. And just while I'm on that topic really quick, during the comment section, somebody asked about eminent domain, and I want to address that. The city does not have the ability to acquire any homes through eminent domain for redevelopment purposes. The laws changed, Minnesota state statutes changed with regards to that in 2005. The only reason eminent domain could be used in this area would be for the construction of Richfield Parkway. we have not contemplated using it, but I think that would be available to the city. So
Thank you.
Can I have a response to that? Because in actuality, what has been sold to the residents of the east side has been a high density to medium density to low density plan as long as I've been here for 21 years.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right. That is going to be the end of our 30 minutes. At this time, I'd ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
Any conversation? Yes.
Developer, does that need to take place during the public hearing, or? can
No,
that
I believe we can do that during conversations
Okay,
according to our
thank you.
bylaws. Yes. All right, so there's a motion and a second for closing the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is closed. All right. Let's move on to, is there a motion?
Well,
Anybody
Madam
would
Chair, I
like
do
to
have a
entertain?
question. I do have a question.
Yeah.
And I just want to, one of the speakers spoke about property acquisition, and she even brought up eminent domain. I haven't even seen that in any of the materials. Is there any discussion or any intent to take any part of property or anybody's property?
no, just to reiterate that in 2005, the Minnesota legislature amended laws as they relate to eminent domain. Prior to that, a city could acquire homes through eminent domain for redevelopment purposes. After that law changed in 2005, that's no longer legal. And so the only reason a city could purchase any property through eminent domain would be for an actual public use, such as a fire station or possibly a road or something like that, not for development purposes. So that has not been discussed for this
but
area
on
since.
this, I'm talking about this property. There hasn't
No,
been
that has
any
not
discussion.
been discussed in this area since
Okay,
2005.
okay. I didn't think that there were. I just that just came up during one of the statements, and I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Before we ask for motions, am I clear that we are 3 items? Should they be 3 separate motions, or is that one item together? I'm looking at page. I don't see page numbers. Under recommended action, it looks like there
I
are
guess I would say it's always safest to do them as 3 separate.
3 separate. Okay.
Yeah.
You could look at my screen if you'd like to, if anybody would like to make any sort of motion, really.
Well, I'm wondering if we can maybe just talk about where we're at, and especially because we've heard a lot of things from the public tonight, and just sort of to reflect on that while that's
Sure, I'm open to that.
fresh.
Yep.
Because
Would you like to start?
Yeah, I heard a lot of things, and I'm sympathetic to a lot of it. I think especially the statement that for a lot of people in Richfield and anywhere, your home is your largest investment, and that is a really big deal, and I really respect that. But at the same time, I think it's unfortunate in this whole conversation that we're talking about this only as if we're building a big wall, and the only factor is how it affects the single-family homes. That's really important, how we're affecting our residents, but we're gaining 280 families, and I think that's a really big, important, good part of this. That's the main part of this project. So I think this is really good for the community. In general, I'm supportive of it. There are some details that I'll get to that I have concerns about, but acknowledging that this does affect people, but I think it's a net positive, even though there are some costs to it. And particularly the issue about the transitions, because I see that a lot of people point out townhomes. I've heard that both with this project and with others. But I'm also struck looking around at the townhomes in our community. We've got Castile Place, Kensington Park, Penn Place. They're all 3 stories. They're all basically the same. I mean, this is going to be a little bit higher floor-to-floor height, but this is a very short apartment building. This is pretty similar to the scale that the townhomes would be, even if there are technically more people per acre than the townhomes would be. So in my mind, this is an appropriate transition, even if in a perfect world, townhomes might also be there.
Anyone else like to speak?
Yeah,
Commissioner
I
Rosenberg?
guess I just want to say, I've been in this game since 1992, either on the council or now on the planning commission. And those apartments over in Cedar have always had a need to change. And this, to me, looks like a really good development, and something that I am certainly going to support. I think I really appreciated what the developer said about the whole issue with crime. That made a lot of sense to me in regards to more more eyes on the area, because that one vacant area there, I mean, that just opens itself up for crime. I think there is some issues with traffic, and I think that can be kind of looked at when we start going through the problems, if there are any over there. But this has always been a sore spot. Cedar has always been a sore spot for the community. I mean, and mainly because of the condition of the buildings, also some of the problems that have been over there in regards to crime. So this, to me, looks like really a new face on the area over there. And I'm really glad to see this happening. Like I said, I've been around and involved in policy making since 1992. So, and it's not a new problem. And so this is the first time that we've had somebody who comes in and really takes it by the horns. And I really think this is something that we really should be happy to have somebody in here that's willing to do that. So I just really am in supportive of this. I'm really glad to see the affordability piece is still part of it. When I looked at these drawings, I thought that really does promote the neighborhood and help bring it up. And so I'm all for it.
Anybody else?
I would like to say something. And so far that we've been discussing this project, the main issue that I keep hearing over and over is the issue about are all of these units going to be considered affordable housing? And I don't know what article the Star Tribune that people are referencing, but that seems to be a common idea that this entire unit is below market rate. So I'm glad that we cleared that up, that it's not. And that the other thing is the traffic issue. I feel like the neighbors keep bringing up the traffic issue and then kind of keep being told, well, that's not really how we're seeing it as the city. But I feel like we have a consistent number of people who are like extremely concerned about the traffic and don't seem to be on the same page as the city as to what they're seeing. Like if her house went from like her son being able to ride his bike to all of a sudden not being able to ride his bike in the front yard, I guess that's my concern, is that we keep hearing that and I feel like it's not.
It's a bad time to judge traffic in this area. A full closure of 66th Street can play havoc with neighborhood, and we acknowledge that. However, and a big spike in traffic due to the full closure of 66th Street should not be equalized or affiliated with a development of this nature. We were very cautious to make sure that all the access points of this development went onto the new Richfield Parkway, so that it was directly connected to 66th Street and didn't need to circuit through the neighborhoods to do that. In addition, the connection to 68th Street at the south end, we originally had closed off, and this will be a working design as we talk to the neighborhood, but we originally had closed off 18th to the south and 68th to the west, so that those two connected, but the traffic on Richfield Parkway would have been directed over to Cedar and would have been physically impossible to go into the neighborhood. However, what we realized through analysis of the traffic patterns was that would steer everybody south on 18th to go west and up to 16th to get onto 66th Street, which is, not our intent with a brand new Richfield Parkway. So by opening that up to northbound traffic, we'll encourage that neighborhood to actually use Richfield Parkway as opposed to the neighborhood streets to the west.
But
so
just to clarify, southbound traffic would not be able to go down into the neighborhood.
Right. So I feel like with the analysis and the work that we've done with the access points and whatnot, that we've been able to handle that traffic and keep it out of the neighborhood itself.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead. Yep.
I'm sorry, can you reiterate the traffic, how it's not going to be able to go you said south?
Yeah, and maybe
Yeah,
if we
we
could
have
pull
a
up the site plan, that'd be helpful.
I'm just curious because it looks like a two-way street from the plans, and so I was just wondering
Think
how
I've
that's to
got it
be
here.
redirected or negated.
Looks like page 50 is the, and Jeff's brought it up here.
So it's a little difficult to see on this drawing. I'll try to zoom in even more. This is the intersection of 68th Street and Richfield Parkway to the north, or 18th Avenue to the south. And you can see my cursor here. We're narrowing the throat of 18th as it's shown here. This is the existing curb line. We narrow it so it's effectively a one-way north coming out of 18th to the south. That would allow all the residents in that neighborhood to go north out onto the parkway. But the traffic that wants to end up on Cedar, that's coming down Richfield Parkway because it's the first access to Cedar, and we want them to get over to Cedar, they wouldn't be able to just keep cutting down on 18th Avenue through the residential area.
Sorry, they wouldn't be able
would
to?
not,
Okay, thank
going southbound. So they would use 68th for the one block to get back over to Cedar, similar to what they do a block north right now,
So
that
there'll be
condition where it cuts over.
do not enter signs.
Well, if it would be a physical narrowing of the roadway, so when you're driving south on the parkway, you would have a curb in front of you, and then do not enter, and then arrow signs to Cedar Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's somebody could theoretically go around it and go through the wrong way, but people can go down wrong way on one ways too. So.
All right. I would say I, after hearing everyone's comments tonight, had some grave concerns about the 3-story, and kind of filtering that down to the neighborhood. But your point about, townhomes are also mostly 3-story in Richfield anyways is a good point, and that limiting it to townhouse doesn't affect that height. And I think adding more people to the area is going to reduce the crime. The development and kind of bringing that in is going to reduce the crime instead of just the wide open area. So I agree with that. As someone who has lived in apartments in Richfield and then transitioned to a house, I agree that doesn't make me more worthy of crime or more acceptable to crime because of that. So I don't think those points are necessarily fair or valid from people. So that's my 2 cents and thoughts on it. Anybody else want to speak does anybody want to make a motion?
First, could I just ask something of the developer?
Yeah.
Actually, 2 questions. So one is specifically about that north driveway cut. Given that that's only one way in, what exactly does that accomplish? It would seem that and then just speaking to the north parking lot, that L-shaped parking lot on the curve, it would seem that cars dropping off could easily use that island to turn around in your parking lot. I guess I'm just not seeing why that needs to be included at all. And would it be a barrier if it weren't there?
Well, he's not here, so I'll answer it as best I can. So I'm Todd Elkins with Urban Works for the designer. So the reason we have the right in, right out is right in basically is it's right in access to the front door for visitors, guests. Also, it helps with our fire truck access if, hopefully never needed, but to come in. If we had to reduce it, it might make could we do it? I'm sure there's a solution. There's a lot of concerns about parking counts. I don't know how it would affect it. We think we don't expect to see a majority of the traffic going in and out outside of dropping off, or if an Uber comes, natural access point to come in and then loop back up to 66th.
Right. And then I'm also just curious if you could talk about the material quality, what's going to be installed on the outside of this building? What's that going to look like?
So we do have a material board that we can show you, that we can bring out. With the 3 stories, we have a variety of material. We have a CMU base, sort of rock face base. We also have some stone. And then we have lap siding in various colors and an asphalt shingled, I don't know if that'll see it, an asphalt shingled roof besides the windows and the balcony, where we have balcony.
What do you anticipate the lifespan is of those materials? How soon would they have to be replaced after the building is constructed?
Well, hopefully not for a long time, 40, 50 years. I think the ongoing maintenance will be sealant joints around the building, as well as probably in 10 or so years, you might have to repaint. You may repaint anyway, just to update the colors, like you would as a homeowner, but the fiber cement panels take paint actually better than wood would.
Thank you.
So.
Any questions for the developer while they're up here? No? Does anybody want to make a motion?
Did you say this needs to be a 3-part motion or?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I
Well,
can
you
take
ready?
it. So, by motion, number 1.
Okay.
I move that we recommend the approval of a resolution amending the comprehensive plan to change the designation of lots 1 through 8, Block 3, Wexler's addition from medium-density residential to mixed use.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any conversation, any discussion about this first one? All right, seeing no one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? First motion passes.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend approval of an ordinance amending Appendix 1 of the Richfield City Code to change the zoning designation of lots 4 through 13, Block 2, and lots 1 through 8 of Block 3, and lots 1 through 16 of Block 4 in Wexler's addition from mixed-use community and multifamily residential together with the Cedar Avenue or overlay district to a planned multifamily residential.
And second.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I'll move the third part. Recommend approval of a resolution approving a planned unit development, conditional use permit, and final development plan for a multifamily apartment development to be built between approximately 66th and 68th Streets East and 17th and Cedar Avenues.
And I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I would like to move an amendment to that motion to request that they close the northernmost driveway conditional on approval of the fire department or the responsible authority if it is feasible to close that and remain safe for fire access.
Do you accept that friendly amendment since it was your motion?
The clarifying question is that the
inbound only.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Does the seconder?
Yes, and I'll
All right.
approve it.
So there's been an amendment to the motion that has been agreed upon. Any other discussion? Everyone, yeah.
I mean, the only discussion item I would have is if public safety has already seen this and has already taken a look at it and has already looked at the ingress and egress, do we really want to mess with the traffic plan from a recommendation perspective?
I'm okay, for my opinion, I'm okay with it because I don't know if they would have, will they have a chance to relook at it? To say we don't feel
Certainly,
like
and I believe Commissioner Hayford O'Leary's motion was pending consent of the fire department. So certainly, if the fire department said absolutely not, it would basically render his motion or his amended motion null and void.
I don't necessarily know if the first time they were looking at it, they would have said, "Oh, you don't need that. You should take it off." Would be my opinion. But any other discussion?
And I just to clarify why I'm making a stink out of that, because although I appreciate that Three Rivers doesn't mandate that we remove as many accesses as possible, the developer has an interest in using the trail for access to their development, and sort of the more access, the merrier. I think it's important that we be a steward of this new trail that's going into our community, and that we limit access across it. And certainly, if it's a public safety issue, like I said, they should put it back the way it was. But if it's simply the Uber has to go around the curve and then go in, I'd rather have that and reduce an access on the trail.
Jeff, you look like
Yeah, I'll just clarify with the Three Rivers Park. They didn't raise a fuss, so to speak, or raise an objection to the entrance, but they would certainly welcome removal of an additional crossing. So,
And I would just point out, as interested as I am in seeing multimodal transportation, there will be more cars now and for the foreseeable future going through this space, as much as it pains Commissioner Hayford O'Leary that we're not all bicyclists. That's my concern, is the reality is most people are driving cars.
we'd be happy to sit down again with public safety.
Perfect.
Be happy.
Thank you. All right,
Thank
so there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. And that's it for this one. Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Who haven't left already, we really appreciate it.
Is now the obligatory time when you would point out that those who have an interest in this, given that this is an advisory opinion, can show up at the next public meeting?
For the city council?
Yes.
Yes, but there is no public hearing.
No, but public meeting. So the city council.
Yes, the city council this will be on their agenda. There will be no public hearing for you to come up and speak, but you're certainly welcome to reach out to your, do you know what date that is?
No, Matt might. But just to clarify, these items that you're considering tonight will not have a public hearing at the city council. There are other items related to this
Will it be on the
project that
consent
might.
calendar, or will it?
It will not be on the consent calendar.
Okay, so it will be an item, just not a public hearing.
Right, and there will be other future items related to platting,
Yeah.
perhaps related to financing that would be public hearings.
Perfect.
And
HRA
it's-
often has things too, so.
Right, and it's slated for final council consideration on September 26th.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, where are we here? This is a public hearing to consider changes to the city's zoning ordinance that would make small wireless facilities a conditional use in residential districts. Staff? I didn't even realize we had this one. Oh, yeah.
Before we begin, I'd just suggest that any conversations that are still going on be moved to the lobby, please.
Yes. Can you guys move out to the lobby, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Vries Daniels and members of the Planning Commission. State law gives telecommunications right-of-way users the right to install facilities in the right-of-way. This right is subject to local governmental authority to manage right-of-way permitting. In 2017, the Minnesota legislature amended the definition of a telecommunications right-of-way user to include persons deploying facilities to provide wireless service. I take that to mean previously it did not include wireless service, but your traditional wired utilities. Wireless providers may deploy a small wireless facility or wireless support structure in the right-of-way under the new state law. And to pause and define what the statute considers small, defines small as antennas not exceeding 6 cubic feet and all associated equipment, excluding certain types, backup generators, must either be concealed or less than 28 cubic feet, which, fun fact, is approximately the size of a refrigerator. While the city's authority to deny permits in the right-of-way is now limited by this new law, cities may make such facilities or structures a conditional use in right-of-way located in quote, a district or area zoned for single-family residential use or within a historic district, end quote. The City Council held a work session to discuss this issue on July 25th and directed city staff to move forward with an amendment to make these facilities a conditional use in single-family residential areas. The attached ordinance is just a first step. The city will continue to evaluate specific conditions to attach to these facilities, such as spacing requirements between them, setbacks, things like that. But given that cities are not permitted to adopt a moratorium to study the issue, that's from the state statute, the city attorney has advised simply making the uses conditional and utilizing the standard conditional use permit requirements for the time being until we can bring forward a more detailed ordinance. And then the 2017 state statute was effective immediately upon adoption, so the city attorney has recommended making these modifications to city ordinances as soon as possible.
Quick question, am I assuming that because it's a conditional use, we would be able to look at each one and evaluate the size and make it decorative so it's not sitting out really ugly in the front of something?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay. Well, it's a public hearing, but Yeah, question.
I'm move we close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Public hearing's closed. I will go ahead.
Chair Reese Daniels, one follow-up question for staff. Roughly how many of these do you expect in a year? Or in other words, how much more slow, long, and boring are our meetings going to be?
Exciting.
Well, I will say that I would guess that a majority of their application locations will not meet the requirements for this, that they'll just come into Public Works and have to be approved administratively. I don't know that for a fact, but from what I've heard,
And
they
then this
will be.
again would only be single family residential zoned districts. So any small cell wireless applications for right of way in commercial districts would not be held to the
So this is-
would not be conditional uses. They would be permitted and approved administratively by Public Works.
But it would still be adjacent to major arterials except for 66th Street, along 76th Street, and then Lindale. The ends of Lindale, Nicollet, and Portland, because the intervening spaces are all single-family residential, including 66 to 62.
Yes,
For the
that is correct. There is a large amount of single-family zoned residential property along all of the major arterials, so it's quite possible.
Yeah, and I guess I would also, this was a pretty contentious issue for the last year. Despite what the ultimate legislation looks like, it was a kind of a win for us, and when you compared it to some of the things they were asking for. But this is more of a proactive kind of, because we can't do a moratorium. This would be a way to kind of get out in front of it, limit it a bit across the whole city. As Matt said, there's other areas where they can do it and get it approved administratively. We may, a year from now, when we've had a chance, when some of these things have gone in, say, you know what, they really aren't that big a deal, and maybe we can relax it a little bit. But anything that we're allowed to do in the law was pretty restrictive about what we're allowed to do compared to what the cell companies are. But anything that we are allowed to do, we want to kind of get out in front and do that now, and then we can always relax things later.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
All right, can I
You got a
just
question?
no, yeah. So, right, sounding really articulate after a long meeting here. Are they required to be on existing poles, or can they just like plop any new pole? Because the ones that I've seen installed are on existing light poles, or they're replacing one-to-one an existing light pole.
Right, so we don't currently have any of these in the Richfield. These are the small cell technology. They could theoretically go on an existing pole, but we can make them do an internal components, so they would supply their own pole.
Okay.
It would have to. It obviously can't match exactly the poles that are out there, but it would have to, blend, so to speak. But it would be very similar. In some cases, in kind of quote unquote the best cases, it looks a lot less like a normal street light pole with some stuff on the top. And in areas where they can, that Matt mentioned the refrigerator thing. I have not seen in the examples that I've seen something so large at the base. They've been able to minimize that component of it. So I guess that, let's be optimistic and say that it won't be a big eyesore and that it'll blend in, because we've obviously, with our street projects, put a lot of effort into creating an aesthetic corridor with pedestrian scale lighting and removal of overhead utilities. So yeah, we do have the ability to kind of control how things look, but not necessarily that they can't do it.
And then I guess my other question is what the rationale is for doing it in these districts, particularly because although some of 66 is single family, much of it is not, and we're putting a lot of money and effort into making that an attractive streetscape. And if because they can't put it on 67th, they're plopping this right in our new streetscape on 66th. What's the rationale for more diligently protecting streets that are less community streets?
Well, I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but the idea of the small cell technology is one that I think everyone supports. It's better service. You know, as things become more wireless, internet and all that sort of stuff becomes more wireless. I can tell you, in the amount of time I've spent driving through Richfield, that there's certainly some dead spots. To date, the large cell, if that's the alternative, that's the current. You know, that there's no way to fix the dead spots without going to a smaller technology. So I think their goal is to fill in the dead spots and provide better service. Now, similar to cell technology in general, they're going to want to go where people are, and most people are along those busier corridors. So I don't know that I don't know the capabilities and the range of these things. I don't know that a block off would really suit their needs anyway, if they wanted to be on 66th Street, so to speak. But I don't know. Is that it? I don't know.
I guess it's just, does state law preclude us from having it being a conditional use everywhere? And if it doesn't, why aren't we doing that? Why just R and R1?
Yes.
I believe that if I understand the state statute correctly, it was basically a preemption law. It was preempting cities from prohibiting these small cell wireless facilities. And the one give, basically the one they prohibited cities from even having a moratorium to study the issue. The one give, I guess, was that they allowed cities to make it a conditional use in residential districts or historic districts only.
Okay.
So it's in anything that is not those two things, single family residential or a historic district, any commercial district, it's permitted.
And multifamily residential, like around 66 Lindale, would not be able to do that?
It would not be, my understanding is that it would not be a conditional use in those districts. The city would not be able to deny it in commercial or mixed use or multifamily or any other district that is not single family residential or historic district, which we do not have any of. It would just be permitted, and Public Works would be essentially required to approve it.
All right. Well, I will say I certainly appreciate our state legislatures deciding how to regulate our land use, but given the restrictions, I think this is a good ordinance.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, I will move then that we adopt the ordinance making small wireless facilities a conditional use in the single family R and R1 districts.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now it's time for liaison reports. Community Service Advisory Commission. That's me. No report. City Council. I keep forgetting that. HRA.
The HRA had a study session on the 22nd where we discussed, the Planning Commission, the Council, and the HRA discussed the Nikolai Apartments development. And it was just the initial plans for it. That's all I got.
Thank you. Richfield School Board.
The board passed a resolution calling an election on November 7th, 2017. So there will be a half dozen candidates, 3 of whom are incumbents on the ballot. So go vote.
When does school start? Okay. Transportation Commission.
I guess the 2 items. So 70th Street, the bike lanes are down, and I hope you guys have all seen it. Hopefully, you've gone for a ride, even Gordon. And then the other item is Lindale Avenue. I guess the council has now expressed interest and put some money towards reconstructing that street, and has put money out to do design work for that. So that was unexpected, but they are shifting money towards that, and it would be a pretty cool opportunity to really improve that street. And then one other thing is that the final approval for 69th Street, the 2-way trail, is approved and is permanent basically until the street is reconstructed.
Perfect. Chamber of Commerce.
No report.
All right. Anybody else? No. City Planners report. Anybody?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what we have shared or haven't shared, Melissa Paleman, at last month's Planning Commission meeting, her title was City Planner. Her title is now Assistant Community Development Director. So she's going to be taking on more responsibilities for managing redevelopment projects and some different kinds of staff responsibilities. That means she would have to relinquish some of her planning responsibilities. That would go really primarily to Mr. Brillhart. That means Mr. Brillhart will have to relinquish some of his current responsibilities. So we will be hiring in a more of an entry-level planner at some point in the near future. And this is in response to the previous Assistant Community Development Director, Karen Barton. She went to St. Louis Park to become their Community Development Director. And so in addition to Melissa becoming our Assistant Director, a staff person named Julie Urban, those of you who've been around for a while, I know Commissioner Rosenberg knows Julie well. Julie is moving up as well, and she will be becoming the new housing manager for the city.
Congrats to everyone. Excellent. Next meeting time and location, September 26th.
I believe that's the city council day. 25th
Okay,
would
sorry.
be the
just total
planning
guess.
commission date.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. I can't think anymore. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Have a good night.